First, I don't believe it, but you might. So I've decided to submit Eastern Mountain to this year's Cursed Conlane Circus. The sole purpose of getting disqualified. Why? Because Mountain ain't cursed. And you can't win a cursed language contest with a normal language, right? Mountain as a language family is highly synthetic, strongly headmarking with polypersonal agreement, grammatical gender, lexicalized voice, and syntactical case, featuring noun incorporation, serial verb constructions, and a nauseating amount of applicatives, derivational morphology, and grammatical quirks. Here is an example of the language family of Mountain as it's been mapped out so far. Both Mountain is actually subdivided into two major branches, Western and Eastern Mountain. The variety that I'm showing specifically is going to be Eastern Mountain, located to the right of this tree. Both varieties of mountain are related to a much larger language family that I'm not going to go into detail because it's unrelated to today's topic. Mountain itself is a language, proto-language to a much larger language family. Here is the geographic range of both Eastern and Western Mountain. As you can see, they're on both sides of this dark mountain range centered around Central Hije, well, Central Hije Major. As we go over to the less eastern variety, you can see the rich array of variety among the speaking population. This is actually a population density map per speaker per capita. It bottoms out around 25%. There are speakers further into these areas that do speak Mountain, but they're less than 25% of the population, and this map just does not cover that. It does go as high as 100% with completely blacked out regions where everyone speaks a variety of Mountain of some kind. Eastern Mountain, a proto-language to a vast array of languages, located deep in the a proto-language to a vast array of languages located deep in the Ci-Máhite Mountain range. Why is that taking so long? Jesus Christ. Mountain's phonology is composed of a rich array of consonants and vowels, having many many places of articulation and many manners of articulation, as well as distinguishing voicing on almost every consonant. Its syllable structure is fairly restricted, only allowing at most a consonant plus L word initially, followed by maybe a non-syllabic vowel plus a vowel, and then finally ending a syllable with a consonant. Most syllables, however, tend to be fairly restricted to just a consonant and a vowel, maybe a consonant and a diphthong. Its phonology does also contain 11 vowels if you're not counting diphthongs. If you're counting diphthongs, I lost track of counting. It does also feature tone, having 3 phonemic tones, a high tone, a low tone, and a rising tone, as well as having an allophonically falling tone, which is developed from the tone sandhi. This is a reference map for tone sandhi. The high tone and the rising tone cause the low tone to turn into a falling tone in specific environments. Additionally, the low tone may cause the high tone to become a rising tone. Additionally, though, high tones may cause the low tone to become a high tone in very specific morphological and phonetic environments. The vowels additionally also influence each other with vowel alpha, which results in basically an unpredictable web of vowels both affecting each other and not affecting each other. And you're better off memorizing which morphemes and affixes cause this vowel alternation rather than trying to memorize which vowels cause what, because a lot of the time, the vowel has already been obscured. Speakers, additionally, diphthongs are hit by the hardest with the diphthong. For example, the root tau has turned into tu and do next to these other syllables. Additionally, native speakers also struggle with this. So, a lot of semantic rebracketing and phonetic shenanigans result in these speakers no longer distinguishing these as being separate roots. Nouns are fairly straightforward, not as nearly as complex as verbs, but they still are. Nouns there are 7 noun classes, and all nouns can be marked for possession. They're specifically agree with their possessor in person. Additionally, and in number with the first and second person, but that's going to get complicated because it appears to be two plural forms with the exact realization not fully cleared, so I just left them out of this chart. As you can see, it's roughly equivalent, but there's a bunch of allophonic rules going on, changing qualities, consonant alternations, all the fun stuff. Well, class 1 to 5 are very unique because they are gendered nouns. Nouns agree, basically all nouns are gendered except for class 7 nouns and class 6 nouns. Class 1 to 5 nouns belong to one of 5 grammatical genders. It gets more ambiguous as it go on, and some speakers increase the number of genders, others decrease the number of genders, or they split the gender classification in different ways based off different phonetic cues and morphological cues, so on and so forth, evolving even more rich, complex morphology in the daughters. Currently, in Proto-Eastern Mountain, a lot of this is a lot simpler, though I still need to finish the reference grammar. But our parts of speech that do agree with the noun's gender are determiners, possessors, adjectives, numerals, and verbs. Class 7 nouns don't have this gender associated with them. Instead, they actually take the gender of their possessor. This results in fun quirks where you don't necessarily know the gender of an item by being spoken offhand, but you can figure the gender of an item based of other parts of speech. And some poets may get very funky with this. As well as class 7 nouns, their possessors aren't proper possessors. They don't represent the possessor of this noun. Instead, they function closer to a classified agent or a demoted object. So, yeah, and it's probably good because a lot of these nouns tend to be abstract ideas or sometimes even nominalized verbs. Mountain has 4, 5, 6 cases, depending on how you count. Some nouns do distinguish between the absolutive and the absolute plural, which is considered a case in this grammar, but I'm not including it here because I don't want to get into the full explanation. I just do not have time. I'm recording this and I have like 3 hours left for the submission. The absolutive is the citation form. It is the form that is incorporated, with class 7 not being able to properly be incorporated, and class 6 basically having a marked citation form, so the proper absolutive just doesn't occur with class 6. The possessive case is the case that is used to mark the possessor of a possessive clause. Both the possessor and the possessum are marked for possession, but the possessor marks specifically proximate possessors that are not indefinite. So this is functionally a very specific type of possession. If you run into a situation where you need to specify it's an indefinite possessor, or if it's a possessed thing, like my mother's brother, I would have to use a genitive construction, which looks closer to the absolute paradigm right above. But you may notice that possessors, or nouns in the possessive case, take agreement with the nouns they're possessing's gender. Class 6 nouns do not do this. They just take the possessive marker and that's it. So, yeah, let's move on to the acquative. The acquative basically functions as and. It has a lot more complex. It is a coordinator that subordinates the noun that's attached to. So, a lot of these examples you might find, you'll get and. But some examples you might get using or by or using by or with. And this honestly comes a lot in when you're dealing with the applicative series. That we'll get on when we get to applicatives. But for example, like I have a word that means to walk in this language, but if you use one of the applicatives, then you would say, depending on which applicative you use, you may have the singer walks with the ox or the singer rides the ox, with the only difference being the applicative, but the ox will always be in the acquative case, regardless. So whatever noun is in the acquative case is demoted to more of an oblique statement or a supporting form, and it is semantically closer to the noun it's attached to. Now, all verb agreement and all reference tracking with the role, it's going to the noun that the acquative case is attaching. The noun in the acquative case is basically syntactically attaching to. Now, let's go on to the essive case. The essive case basically functions as to be. It marks a predicated nominal. That is it. And its job is just to mark a nominal that is being predicated. And it translates as the singer is. So this example translates to a singer is the tree. There is also the nessive case, which is a negative predicate. Additional fun fact is both the essive and the nessive agree in person, which is why the example I am Soton is a single word. And that's fun. Note the nessive and essive only agree in person, they do not agree in gender. Verbs. This is where verbs get the most complicated. As you can see, this is a transitive stem. I'm going to show about 3 examples. Transitive stems can take on these marked forms. They have a simple stem and an aorist stem. Additionally, these stems may be influenced by if it's like an objectivized or if it's an infinitive. And they still can take applicatives at this point in time, but that is falling out of use. Most younger speakers tend to put a associated motion verb in there to support the applicative for the associated motion. Aside of that, this tends to be kept among older speakers in more formal contexts and generally a bit more in poetry. Outside of that, though, it tends to fall out of favor. And here's another example of how these look so different. You also may notice that the perfective functionally has a vowel as a prefix, and this vowel is actually from reduplication. Now, if the stem is a vowel initial stem, that prefix doesn't occur. Additionally, this only happens on transitive stems with an intransitive stem not taking that prefixing vowel. Additionally, you may also notice that this is an intransitive stem. You can see that it can take the transitizer. It's also required. This stem is also used to form reflexives and to properly promote applicatives. Applicatives can attach to intransitive stems regardless of function. They can function in associated motion, though that is still favored using a associated motion verb. When they're attaching to these verbs, though, they tend to just take the proper applicative function. And these stems are where you actually get proper applicatives in the mountain. As you can see, the phonetic forms between the simple and aorist are often just somewhat similar, but they also might be quite distinct. And here is an accusative stem. Now, the last 2 I showed you were actually ergative stems, where the argument that they're agreeing with is actually the agent, the cause, and it's not specifying the object. Here, we're specifying the object without specifying the agent. And to do that, you need to use a transitizer, or you might need to use a causative, or a objective. Notice that the ergative verbs do have this thing called the objectivizer, and this is also true for the transitive verbs. The objectivizer for transitive verbs turns the transitive stem into a stative verb, where when it's applied to a ergative stem, it turns it into an accusative verb, and that has a function later down the road that you will see in one of the examples I give. And you can see in this example, the simple and aorist look almost nothing alike. Ugh. And here we get to applicatives. Mountain has about 87 applicatives. Yeah, there's a bunch. One thing that you might notice, though, is a lot of these applicatives might just look like they mean the same thing, or they might be phonetically similar. Some of them look identical except for tone patterns. Some of them look identical except for consonant patterns, so on and so forth. You also may notice certain of these may behave very similarly. For example, we have a series of benefactive and malefactive applicatives. We have two applicatives that specifically mean to equip and to disequip, like to pick up a rock, to put down a sword, that kind of thing. Additionally, we also have applicatives like the genitive. A lot of these also have double meanings. So the genitive may also just mean to be in contact with something. The distal may also mean to be with. It's also used for like moving within a crowd, to be within a crowd, or to be with friends. Stuff like that. So on and so forth. So, for example, if I were to say I am in a forest, I would probably want to use series 7, which is this 7 up here, going down to the distal, and that is not to be confused with I am in water, which uses the in essive series 7. It's the in applicative series 7. That's kind of stuff that you get into. And you're like, okay, but what if I'm the object? Well, then if you're the object, you might want to go over to series 6. Or if the whole action's happening in this event, then you might want to go over to series 5. If there is motion, then you might want to go over to series 4, but this is if you're applying to the whole verb clause. If it's only applying to the object, then you might want to go over to series 3. That's if there's motion. If there is also motion, then and you're happening to the agent, then you're probably dealing with your series 1 or series 2, where series 1 means the agent is able to do the action and move it with their own volition, their own ability. But if they need some kind of aid or some kind of tool or something to help achieve this, then you might want to use series 2. Instruments are also often used with series 5, series 4, and series 5. It gets very complicated very quickly. And I honestly have like 13 pages just describing how they're functioning in a reference grammar I'm writing that it's still a work in progress. I will go more in depth, but I'm still recording this like 3 hours left. So here is a demonstration of applicatives in function. In practice. Notice that I'm actually not including a manner verb, posture verb, or motion verb that is more likely to occur in more modern daughters. But this very specific stage, it's optional and it's more custom among younger speakers, but not older speakers. It's also not found among more formal registers. So it's a structure that does exist. It's just not implemented as much at this point in time. As you can see, I have the same verbal form that's applied to everything. And all I do is tack on an applicative, which allows me to add this oblique argument at the end, which then tells you where this oblique is relative to the action and the participants. And a lot of these are being translated as relative clauses, like I, under the tree, eat the apple. I eat the apple, which is under the tree. While under the tree, I eat the apple. Simple, easy, no problem. Let's remove one of the core arguments and promote the oblique argument. Like a proper applicative. What happened here? Well, one, I took a transitive stem and I had to change it out for an intransitive stem. I used the ergative intransitive stem here because there's no accusative equivalent, which is why we have the objectifier here to change that ergativity to accusativity. So I can have an object but no mandatory agent, stuff like that. Then the applicative is attached with the transivisor because it was an intransitive. I need to raise the valency. And now I'm introducing the object or the agent. Notice how actually it replaced one of the core arguments. And which one it does that is determined by which applicative you are using. Am I replacing my subject? Am I replacing my object? It depends on your applicative. As you can see, in the first example that got changed out, under the tree eats the apple. Specifically, though, this is specifying someone who is under the tree eats the apple. That person does not matter. It's just the action happens under the tree, and being under the tree is that important to the speaker that they're promoting the oblique to that position. If I just realized I forgot to include apple. So this sentence right here is actually second sentence is supposed to include apple. They're both the same gender. Their order does not matter. It's determined by the verb agreement, and generally you can figure out what by the applicative. However, I eat under the tree. That oblique is lost because first person agreement is still there. Notice gender agreement does not change because tree and apple are the same gender. However, first person and third persons are not the same gender, or nor are they the same person. So specifically what happens here is the first person agreement is replaced with the unknown third person agreement. And the reason why it's unknown, even though we do know the gender, is because gender class 5 and class 4 nouns, which are of the lowest gender classes, cannot directly occur as agents. Some daughters down the line do create a new structure called the ergative agreement, or the inanimate ergative marker. Others just maintain keeping this strategy. Others still develop a new strategy to add in objects, and then you just deal with a much more complex structure happening here. So yeah, and this is where we get to the verb complex. I wish I had brought some water because my mouth is dry. Okay, so this is just an example of how verbs in Mountain can get very big, and the stuff that can happen inside of a verb. This is a simple stative verb that just means I am yellow. I am going to put a causative on this. This changes it from a stative verb to a transitive verb. And that is just the semantic bounding, as you can see. There, you can notice both I am yellow and I am that causes, specifically that causative right there actually indicates that is applied to a stative verb, which causes the state to be a temporary state applied to me, applied to the object. And so we have Agma Schwa bruises me, because Agma Schwa causes me to have the temporary state of being yellow. That's just bruises. And it's this specific word for yellow that causes bruising. If I used a different one, then you might get the interpretation of Agma Schwa painted me yellow. That's not what's happening here. So let's get more complicated. I added a verbal prefix that indicates mood. And this one is want. So Agma Schwa wants to bruise me. How violent. As we can see, this just builds up, makes the words a bit longer. And let's put in another verbal root. Specifically, let's put in a verbal stem, a transitive verbal stem to fight. Agma Schwa wants to fight and bruise me. The reason why this is taken as to do and, so that it's a sequential meaning, is because both of them share the same aspect. Now, if one of them were to change the aspect to specifically, let's say, the aorist, then you get the meaning of until. The reason why this happens is because the aorist can take on finality, but it also can mark a state that is going to occur. The reason why this takes on a finality here is because of the causative. Now, if it was applied to just the stative verb itself, then basically you might get the statement of, I am bruised yellow in preparation of Agma Schwa fighting me. As if I was trying to make it sure Agma Schwa just wasn't going to fight me, or Agma Schwa's fighting me because I'm already weak and beaten down. Let's figure this out. Here I add an applicative so I can add an oblique argument. Now, Agma Schwa wants to go inside this video to fight me until I am bruised. Pretty true, right? And right here, the word video is actually really just like story, because Mountain is spoken like the year 100, and there's no videos at the moment. So Agma Schwa wants to go inside the video and fight me until I am bruised. Now let's make this even more complex, because no native speaker at this period who's really relatively young would actually keep putting the applicative right on there. They want to use a associated motion verb. Specifically, this one I'm going to use to break. Now, to break is specifically like to move in secret, to do unnoticed. So this right here, to break inside, is closer to like Agma Schwa wants to sneak into this video to fight me until I'm bruised. But yeah. Notice though that the reason why I have two of these semantic elements blue, while only one of them is like yellow, one's red, and one's green, is the simple fact that the blue elements are mutually exclusive. I could switch their places and nothing will change in this translation. The only difference is the personal agreement will no longer be on the verb to be bruised. Instead, it will be on the verb to fight. having the ne undergo agreement in person, and the ju just stay ju, or just shu, depending upon specific rules. So as such, this is a fairly straightforward translation, and this doesn't even get into like the number of person markers in the language. Mountain has a whopping 1,324 personal endings. This is including the pa series, which isn't even included in this chart. This is about as big as I could make the chart in the time I had, because I started like a week ago because I was crazy, and then I had to work for like 5 days straight. So, yeah, Mountain is extremely synthetic. There's a lot going on. A quick breakdown of what the pa is doing, because you will see it in the translation, is it is marking the object of the verb as either being the true object or being the indirect object, depending upon which type of semantic verbs you're dealing with. And here is the translation that we have. And I do have a good friend of mine who did help with this translation. So yeah, I'm just gonna break down what's happening here before I pull up that translation for us. So what is happening is, oh brain, what did you do? My brain forgot what I was doing. Okay. So with this translation, we have the statement of, I am certain of 3 things. This is composed of the verb that means to be certain. It has a genitive applicative on that, which is associating 3 things of what I'm certain. And 3 specifically is actually being a proclitic on the verb who or what, specifically an abstract notion of what. Mountain does not have ordinals. Instead, it just uses a adverb, and that adverb is attached to just placed before it indicates the start of the first ordinal clause. And then we have Edward, who's placed in the S-ib and then attached to vampire. Side note, Mountain speakers do not have a concept of vampires. They just don't. Vampires to Mountain speakers don't exist, so I had to translate vampire here as literally being evil blood spirit. Yep, which is why it's in the holy class, or the nominal class 1, gender 1. So then I add on to after that, we have, let's see, I am placed in danger. It's associated motion, so it's not an applicative, you're just associating the action. To blood suffer without, that just means to thirst for blood. And there's a causative. This specific causative actually means to place the object in danger while also changing the subjecthood from the agent to the object. It's one of like two causatives that do this. Then you have the symbol stem plus the plus the holy agreement. So this functionally acts as he is placing me in danger. He is thirsting for my blood, which places me in danger. And then I have the accusative, which is indicating that the object is a true object and not a agent. So he isn't causing me to suffer thirst for blood. He is thirsting for blood, which is placing me in danger, and I'm the thing that he's thirsting for. So this is more specifically, he's thirsting for my blood as a result, because blood here is actually an incorporated noun of a possessed noun. So we get some oblique promotion. And then we have the clause, I just do not know how much danger I am in. You may notice that is a negative statement there, and this is because Mountain has double negative reinforcement. You cannot negate the verb without also negating one of the core arguments. That's just a rule. And then after that, we have, I cannot control how much I want to fuck him. And that uses a relative clause, functioning more as like an adverb and all that stuff. So, for the spoken example, I did have a good friend, Alice, read this out for me. And
Jeg så til å sjå just fe. Jeg tror jeg til å tanza kommer. Jeg tror jeg fikk til å tundan på hokkolo senyomo pameo. Gat 그렇게 밀리 보고 좋대. 호진색하. 얘도 내 관련주는 거 해안요 가시녀 무왕.